We've got sunny skies and 81 degrees. It's 12:34 at your hometown station, 95.3 WBEV, powered by Daily Dodge, and it is now time for Community Comment. We head to the Daily Dodge TV Center, and here is WBEV News Director Kevin Haugen.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff, and welcome into today's Community Comment. I am your host, Kevin Haugen. It is my pleasure to welcome into the conversation on our program this afternoon today is Shanna Hanneman. She is the Bank Secrecy Act Officer of Farmers and Merchants Union Bank in Columbus. We'll talk more in a moment exactly what that title is, because I had never heard of it until just moments ago, so we'll explain that more. And we're here to talk today about a very important topic. We're here to talk about frauds and scams, specifically financial and scams that involve people losing money. It's really a big topic that's becoming more relevant and prevalent lately, and unfortunately we've been seeing a lot more victims of these types of crimes in our area. So a very important topic and a very important discussion today, this afternoon. So Shanna, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. If you have a question for our guest this afternoon on the program, you can call in at 885-4446, or you can text 887-9595, and we'll get to your questions during our program this afternoon. But before we really dive into the nitty-gritty of the different type of scams and frauds and what people can do to protect themselves here on our program today, Shanna, I want to give you a moment to really sort of explain your title and your role and what you do at Farmers and Merchants Union Bank there in Columbus, and just sort of explain to our listeners why that is such an important role for a financial institution such as a bank.
Oh, I appreciate that. So Bank Secrecy Act Officer, or otherwise known as a BSA Officer, exists in all financial institutions. We are in charge of monitoring, looking out for suspicious activity as one of our main job functions. And so in the background, a lot of the times I'm looking at things that are out of pattern and stuff like that. But I also take referrals for situations, and that's where a lot of the fraud stuff comes into play. And I sit down with my customers and have a conversation with them if we suspect that there's a scam happening to them, and just try to give the expertise of, here's my experience with this kind of thing, here's what I think is going on.
Yeah. And so how long have you been doing this role?
So I've been with Farmers and Merchants Union Bank for 5 years this month, and I've been in that specific role for 4 years.
Okay. Is that something that you had identified as an interest of yours throughout your career, or just sort of wound up in that position?
It just kind of landed there, to be honest, but it was a very fitting role, I think, for me. And I'm happy to be doing it. And
it's an important role at really any sort of financial institution. You said it's required at any bank. So wherever you bank locally, there's a BSA, Bank Secrecy Act Officer.
Somewhere in the organization, yeah.
Somewhere in the organization that is really sort of, I kind of interpret it as you're an investigator in a sense. You're sort of investigating things that come to your attention and figuring out how to prevent this and situations from happening, and protecting the financial security of your customers and making sure that nothing bad happens to you.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So again, we are chatting with Shanna Hanneman here on Community Comment. The phone number 885-4446 if you want to get on the program today and ask any questions during our Community Comment program this afternoon. So we could be here for 4 or 5 hours talking about this topic. So, exactly. So maybe we'll have another program down the road, because I'm certain we will not get to every topic on this list that you had forwarded me, just highlighting many different things that you deal with and see on sometimes a day-to-day basis at your job. But first, I kind of just want to start off talking about the classic check scam and what you see there, and kind of what that entails, and what people can do to spot those if they're not familiar with something like this.
So check fraud is the number one trending scam out there, and the unfortunate part is I can't tell you exactly how it's going to present itself, because they're going to use all sorts of different types of stories to essentially send you a fake check. What they're looking for is for part of that or all of that check to be returned to them. So the storyline could vary between each situation. And they usually want you to act quickly,
Right.
because there's only so much time before the financial institution is going to get information that the check isn't good. So it's interesting because people use checks less, but that specific fraud is the number one fraud that's reported right now.
It's a quick little side note, too, that I wanted to highlight here before we got too far into the weeds of our conversation, too, that there is, and really it's the genesis of why we're sitting here today and talking about this topic, that there is a newly launched tracker tool that I believe it was the Department of Financial Institution, the State Department had launched here not too long ago, where people can submit complaints and track a lot of this stuff and see different stories, and people can look up things and find that stuff. We do have a link on our website at Daily Dodge if people want to go check that out and learn more about that tool. But is that something that if somebody has an instance of a check scam and they want to report that, that would be a good tool, a resource to be able to report those details too?
Absolutely. So I usually tell people that, let your financial institution know that this is happening. They may have other means to help you out. But beyond that is when you report it to places like the WDFI, they can have a bigger collection of those stories and really start tracking those trends. And so that is a good place to report that as well. Yeah.
It's an important resource. I think that it hopefully we don't need more. That's something you don't want to have a bevy of, but hopefully resources like these kind of help nip a lot of this stuff in the bud and keep things from getting worse. But unfortunately, that seems to not be the case, especially with these check scams, financial scams. They just keep popping up left and right, and you see these all the time in your position there at the bank there in Columbus. And you mentioned that it seems to be a call to action a lot of times with these check scams. They want people to act as quickly as possible. Like on the list that you had provided here, it's you could be receiving an inheritance is something that is commonly seen. A remote job is sending a check to cover equipment purchases is another common one. Overpaid something that you had purchased online is something else that you can see, or a friend needs to negotiate a check for them because they have an issue with their new bank. So those are a couple of different examples that you've seen that kind of entail this check scam, and it's something for people to kind of keep an eye out and look out for.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are all examples of things that I see on a normal basis, not just one-offs.
Yeah.
So, like I said, those storylines change. But essentially, the bones of that scam is, here's a fake check. Send me money after you deposit it.
Now, is this something that usually starts off as like an email that people get into, a phone call, or what? How do
all of it?
All of it.
You will make contact, or they will make contact with you in any means. So text, email, phone call, fake website, social media, you name it.
I feel like it's getting harder to spot phony emails, phony scams. Scammers are becoming unfortunately, far superior at being able to mimic bank emails or spoof phone numbers and being able to see it's a local number that I should trust that then because it's coming from my area. We'll chat more in a little bit into some of the things that people can look out for and ways to keep themselves safe so they don't become victims of scams here in just a little bit. But it is becoming harder, I feel like, for people to recognize some of the telltale red flags of a scammer and being able to prevent those things from happening. It's becoming harder to spot those things.
I tell people all the time that these people are professionals at what they do. It is very hard to determine sometimes, and some of them have gotten really good. Yeah. And so, again, it's one of those things where you have to rely on, maybe your financial institution in their experience in order to identify some of them. Yeah. There's ones that even I think are good. And I see this stuff all the time.
Yeah. Another one here that we want to highlight is investment scams. It's not quite the same as a check scam, but what does that one look like?
Big dollar amounts is what it looks like. So, I just had one recently where we saw the incoming credit from a legitimate investment firm, and they were looking to wire that large dollar amount back out to a brand new company, which was only registered a few months ago in a different state, because they felt that they had the information. They were told that their investment firm was hacked, and so they had to keep their money safe, when in reality that was a shell company, and they would have passed that money along to scammers. So it's something that I see quite often, but the whole ticket for that is we were talking large dollar amounts.
Is this something that people in positions that handle large sums of money, a treasurer, is this something that they would tend to see more often than like maybe a regular person who's, not maybe dealing in that sort of cash, or is that something they target?
Anyone.
Anyone.
Anyone. And the unfortunate part is we may be talking about somebody's entire retirement fund. So it's one of those things that if it leaves, it's concerning, because it's unlikely that you're going to be able to track down who's really behind all of that.
Yeah, and you made a great point, Shannon, just a few moments ago, that you guys, at the bank, in your role, or even the tellers at the front desk, are there to make sure that the money that you have put into that bank is protected and safe. So again, it's about relying and trusting on your financial institutions and being able to call them and say, hey, I got something in the mail, or I got something here that I just was having more questions about. And is that something that you do recommend people calling out and reaching out to and just having those questions?
Every time.
Yeah.
If I always tell people, trust your gut. If there's something that doesn't seem quite right, reach out to us. We'd be happy to answer the questions for you. And part of the problem, and the reason why I say reach out to your financial institution, is because scammers are telling you not to trust your financial institution. In fact, they'll try to convince you that there's insider fraud going on, and then people don't feel like they can be honest with us. If you're told to lie to your financial institution, that's a problem, because we're not there to harm our customers. We're there to help protect them.
Right.
So.
Another great thing to remember there here from Shannon Hanneman here is the Bank Secrecy Act Officer at Farmers and Merchants Union Bank in Columbus. Again, if you have a question, 885-4446 to get on the program this afternoon. And another scam that's kind of if you want to call it maybe an embarrassing scam for some people who end up finding themselves victimized by this particular scam, romance scams. They tend to go after those who are, maybe who are alone and who want some sort of companionship, and people who are more susceptible to buying into certain stories and lies from scammers. But Shannon, what is this scam sort of? How does this start out? How does this get going and ultimately results in somebody unfortunately losing potentially large sums of money?
I mean, for any romance scam that I've encountered, it's all virtual. It's all through texting or social media. These are ones that I really struggle with, because these scammers aren't acting quickly. They're not within a week asking for money or telling them to conduct some sort of transaction. They're playing the long game. We're talking months, sometimes years. And it's to build that trust. And when you get people's emotions involved with it, it's hard to convince them that that's what's happening. That's one that I struggle with talking to people about, because they don't want to believe it. And it hurts. It hurts to see people go through that.
Now, is this something that you've seen or have had to deal with on a basis in your role often, or is this
quite often? Quite often. Yeah, I would say at least every other month I'm having a conversation with somebody about it, at least. So and that's just what I know about. So.
And that's a great point, because another thing that we did briefly talk about before coming on air today is this is at times it's difficult to get people to come forward and report a lot of these instances to the authorities or to banks, so they can track these things and prevent them from happening again down the road, primarily because it's an embarrassing thing to talk about. You don't want to admit to people that, hey, I got suckered into this and I gave away a large sum of money to somebody I did not know just because they fed me a lot of lies that I believed. And it's a hard thing to get people to sit down and come forward and discuss these things just because of the nature of these types of scams.
Yeah. And like I said before, that's why I tell people these scammers are professionals, and you're the victim of a crime. So that's something that I want people to, think about if they end up being the victim. Is there are people that want to help you, and we're not here to judge you. We're here to help.
Yeah. What when it comes to romance scams, what are some of the other red flags that people should be on the lookout for?
Oh, there's a bunch. So some of those would be things like, any story of why they can't come and visit you, or why they don't have access to their own financial institution. A lot of the times they'll start building up a story about like a sick family member or something. The classic, I work on an oil rig, and so I can only contact certain times, or I'm unreachable, or I can't leave because I'm at my job constantly. Those are all just big red flags. Yeah. If there's somebody who's building this relationship with you and there's always an excuse, or there's anything that seems out of the norm, like you can't find information on the person, those are all things to pay attention to.
Yeah, and looking here at the list that it's sent over, another way to identify these, or another red flag, is if somebody isn't willing to do a video call or show themselves on pictures, or on a streaming service where you could chat with somebody face to face. It's sort of also another thing that I feel like might be changing here in the future, just because of filters and the way AI has developed over the last couple of years. It's easier for people to put on a false face online and on social media and present themselves, and even go on video chats with individuals and appear like a completely different person, or appear as somebody as they describe themselves. And it's unfortunately, the tools out there are becoming more readily available for scammers to utilize and trick people into sending them money.
I agree. And so my go-to is your money should not be involved in your relationship. If you're not in a face-to-face committed relationship, your money shouldn't be involved with that.
Exactly. We just time is just running by here already. We just have a few more minutes left here, and I want to get to some ways at preventing the scam. We talked a little bit about that, but I want to spend a few more moments diving a little bit deeper into that. But there is one more here I want to just spend a quick moment on talking about that. It's the imposter scam. What's that one about?
Again, that storyline is going to be different, but we're talking about scammers who are pretending to be a company or a government agency, and the purpose is to make somebody feel like their money isn't currently safe. That tends to be the storyline of, here's what you need to do with your money because it's not currently safe. The other one with that is offering refunds, and a lot of the times what I'll see is they get remote access to somebody's device, and they'll be like, fill out this refund form, and they make it appear that, they got too big of a refund, now they have to go take money out and take it to buy gift cards to pay them back. So that comes from, again, all different directions and all different entities or government bodies that they're pretending to be. And the same goes with, other things like even your Medicare and things like that, anything that they can gain for themselves.
Shanna, what are some things you recommend if somebody, or maybe because again, it's hard for somebody in the middle of these situations to identify and recognize what's happening, but say if a loved one is able to spot this and they want to be able to talk to them and share some important tips and things to remember to prevent them from being scammed, what are some of those recommendations that you would have for our listeners?
Well, again, it always comes back to you need to trust your gut. If something seems off, if something's too good to be true, you have to trust yourself in those moments. Even if you do feel like, this is just fine, there are ways to check on those. So if you got a phone call or you're told to call a certain phone number, try going out and finding the known number. So, if you're getting a phone call and they say that they're a local police department, call the known number and and verify with them that they are trying to get in contact with you. Any legitimate business or government agency is going to understand if you explain, hey, I'm going to call you back in just a moment just to verify I'm talking to the right person. So those are just some of the basics of, take your time, do your research, involve other people. So if there's something that's really concerning and they're telling you not to tell anyone, maybe you should tell somebody. In fact, most of the time you should.
Yeah.
You have a discussion with your family members or somebody else, like your financial institution.
Yeah, I feel like a really big component of this is educating yourself. So I saw you here on the list here. One option you can do is sign up for consumer alerts from the FTC. So that there's ways out there that because sometimes people aren't familiar what the new scams are, what's circulating out there in our area. And there are reports and press releases being sent out to alert the public about that, but sometimes it's hard to know where to look. So signing up for those consumer alerts, I believe, it would be a good way to get those.
I get them every day.
Yeah.
And sometimes they release several a day on different topics. It is good information to just, kind of skim over and look and see, is that something that may affect me at some point. So, yeah, consumer alerts is something that, that's something preventative that you can do, is just stay on top of what these trends are.
Fantastic. Well, we are just about out of time here on Community Comment this afternoon. Really fascinating information discussed here today. Hopefully, maybe down the road in a month or two, maybe we can have another conversation here with Shana highlighting other scams. The list is unfortunately very long when it comes to this particular topic, so there is plenty to discuss, even more resources and things that people can pay attention to prevent themselves from becoming a victim of these types of scams. But I want to thank, again, our guest here on Community Comment this afternoon. We are joined with Shana Hanneman. She is the Bank Secrecy Act Officer at Farmers and Merchants Union Bank in Columbus. Thank you again, Shana, so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
And that will do it for today's Community Comment.